Welcome back to episode 2 of the Empowered Effect. I'd be so grateful if you're listening to this or watching this somewhere that you subscribe. I really want to hear from more amazing women and their stories. Today we're going to hear from Amanda Cotton, an amazing interior influencer whose grid is so beautiful and her house is even better. Behind that beautiful curated grid is a story that really moved me and I wanted you to hear about. It's her story of IVF. Now, some people may find this triggering, so I understand if you can't listen from this point. However, if you are on an IVF journey, this might give you hope, and I hope it does. Thank you so much for tuning in, and here's the interview.
Well,
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you for coming to my house.
The crack den.
Oh no, it's the rat den.
The rat den. It doesn't look like a rat den at all. It is absolutely beautiful. Honestly, you guys can't see it, but this house is so beautiful. So if you don't follow Amanda on House Lust, then you must. Anyway, Amanda.
Yes.
Also known as House Lust.
Yes.
Introduce yourself to my audience.
I'm Amanda. I'm known as House Lust on Instagram and all the other social platforms. And I'm a fashion designer and interiors influencer.
An amazing influencer. How many followers?
I think 167,000.
Can you fathom that amount of people?
I know. It's
like we talk about numbers in the influencing world and we just go, oh yeah, 10,000 or 20,000. The amount of numbers are immense. We're not here to talk about influencing today.
Yeah.
Because today I wanted to look deeper into who Amanda is, because I believe that with every woman and their careers, there's always so many layers and journeys that they experience to get to where they did. And this is what this podcast, I don't even know if it's a podcast at this stage, it's an interview. That for me is super inspiring. Part of the work I do, women tell me so many amazing stories, and I know that you've got a personal story that you don't really share. You've shared snippets of it on Instagram, and I'm here to look deeper than interiors and ask you about your IVF journey.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about it because I feel it's still one of those subjects that not everyone feels comfortable talking about. And when you're in the fertility trenches, it's really tough and it's a really traumatic place to be. And I feel really fortunate that although I went through 5 rounds of IVF, we'll go through that, I still feel the trauma from it all, really, and I can understand and relate to anyone that's at the beginning of that process.
Yeah, 5 times. So I've never been through IVF and I'm super grateful I haven't, but also feel so emotional for those people that did. I've watched the film. Have you watched the film?
Which film?
The IVF story.
No, I haven't actually, no.
It's a good story, but if you tell me more about, so if you're a novice and you don't understand, you're much younger, haven't embarked on a pregnancy journey at all, tell me what IVF is and how it works for those people that don't know anything about it.
Yeah, well, shall I start by telling you why I needed
Yes.
So how I kind of came to realising I needed IVF.
Yeah.
So my husband and I had been together for a long time. We got engaged and we were planning our wedding and we started talking about having a family. We've been talking about having a family for a long time, and we decided we'd just start trying to get pregnant. So came off all forms of contraception. We weren't actually bothered if we got pregnant before our wedding. We just knew we wanted a family. So we started embarking on that, and I didn't fall pregnant. I've actually never fallen pregnant naturally, ever. And after a couple of years, I went to my GP and spoke to them about how I'd never fallen pregnant. We'd been trying for a long time. they asked me a lot of questions about my periods and just generally my general health, and they ran some basic tests. They tested my AMH level, which is your egg count level that you can have a blood test that comes, which is an amazing thing if you go to your GP and that you can request it.
Yeah.
They tested me for other things like my thyroid function, because if your thyroid isn't working, then actually nothing really works in your body. And they discovered that I had an underactive thyroid as well.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, so now I've been on levothyroxine ever since.
Oh, wow.
But they kind of were trying to sort of almost start the process of putting the pieces together of seeing, is it the thyroid? Is it the fact that my periods were incredibly heavy? I lose a lot of blood on my cycle every month.
Yeah.
And my periods go on for 7 days solid.
Oh, wow.
And you don't know what's normal and what's not normal until you talk to somebody. And my GP really listened to me and said to me that isn't normal. My iron level was incredibly low. I think I was coming out at a 7, and the average, they want you to be at a minimum of a 10 to 100.
Oh, wow.
But because of my loss of blood every month, so there was lots of factors that they thought perhaps once they corrected all these, it might then sort of almost help kickstart me getting pregnant.
Okay.
But after 6 months of, taking iron tablets, being on levothyroxine for my thyroid, they said, it's time to start some investigation surgery, and they suggested I had a laparoscopy because they suspected I had endometriosis.
Okay.
So I had a laparoscopy and histoscopy, and they diagnosed me with stage 4 endometriosis.
Oh.
And I didn't know anything really about endometriosis. So what I knew was I had incredibly painful periods. I suffer from a lot of back pain in my abdomen, and the bleeding is quite intense to the point where I have, I have quite a few sort of embarrassing moments. Day 2 is horrific. So if I have to go into work, I'd much rather be at home, but life has to go on.
We have to tackle so much as women.
We really do.
Our periods every month, just that in
know.
itself is a lot.
It's such a lot, and yeah, it's pretty horrific to be in an environment. Luckily, I work with a lot of women, and they understand. So, but it can be a struggle if you're in a meeting and you have to pop out of the meeting every 30 minutes to change yourself. It can look a bit sort of suspicious, like, what are you doing? Why are you going to the bathroom every 30 minutes? But anyway, when I came round for my general anaesthetic, I asked the consultant, I remember I was quite out of it, but I said, I need to know, what is it? And he said, oh, you've got stage 4 endometriosis.
Okay.
And I asked him, how many stages are there? And he said, there's 4, and you've got it the worst. So I was like, oh, wonderful. So then the NHS said to me that we will put you on the list to have IVF on the NHS.
Okay.
Because I made a great case for it. They said that the chances are, because I've never fallen pregnant, one of the questions they asked me was, had I ever been pregnant? Had I had any abortions? And actually, I've never had an abortion. I've never had a miscarriage. I've never fallen pregnant. I've never had, and I'm not, let's say, I'm not saying I was never promiscuous in my teens and 20s.
Yeah.
But the doctor found that quite unusual, to find a woman who had never even had a miscarriage after being, actively trying to get pregnant. So, but that was what they discovered. So they discovered the endometriosis, and then luckily they put me on the list for IVF, and it all turned around pretty quickly. I was seen within sort of 3 months.
Okay.
So I embarked on my first round of IVF.
What is IVF?
So IVF, what does it actually stand for? In vitro fertilization. So where they take your egg. So the thing that I think is quite unknown is about egg collections, and how even if you're a single woman and you're wanting to have an egg collection, you still have to go through the IVF process.
Okay.
So they will give you a load of drugs that they all recommend that are going to stimulate you.
Okay, I've seen you inject it into your stomach.
Inject it into your stomach.
Yeah.
So they'll give you these stimulants.
Is that every day, Amanda?
Every day. It depends on whether I went to a clinic where they called it a natural IVF cycle, where they do it in line with your cycle, your natural cycle. But you're still taking a lot of medication.
Yeah.
They stimulate you to encourage your follicles to grow. Then you have an egg collection. I think it's around sort of 14 days. I can't remember exactly, even though I've done 5 rounds. I've kind of got a little bit of PTSD from it, I think. But you have your egg collection. And then, so even if you're doing it on your own, you would still have that egg collection. And then at that stage, they analyse the eggs and they grade them, and they then will fertilise them. And we opted for ICSI, which is where they'll take an individual piece of sperm and they'll actually pop it into the egg, because it gives it a higher chance of actually fertilising rather than putting the sperm
outside of the body.
Yes, so this is all outside of the body now.
I think I saw that in the film.
Yeah, so I guess this is in a petri dish.
Yes.
In the lab, they'll take. You can either it's a little bit more expensive to opt for ICSI.
Okay.
And that's where they take the individual sperm and pop it into the egg, or you can have the more natural way where they put the sperm into the tray and let them, I guess, do their own thing and hope that they find the eggs. We opted for ICSI just because we wanted to kind of make sure that we weren't going to, we didn't want to take any chances.
Yes.
And on my first round, they collected 12 eggs, which was, it's okay. It's not, I was only 34 at this stage.
Yeah.
So at that age, they kind of expected me to have more.
Okay.
And they encouraged me to go gluten-free and dairy-free, which I did at the time.
Interesting.
And they then fertilise them, and then they wait for them to turn into blastocysts. And what they're looking for is a 3-day or 5-day blastocyst. They prefer a 5-day because then that means it's gone 5 days and it's still alive. I think what happens is the blastocysts, the cells split, and they're looking for a blastocyst that has X amount of cells. I can't remember the technical and how many cells they want, but then they'll grade the blastocysts.
Okay.
Yeah, women who are having egg collections would, unless they're creating embryos from either sperm bank sperm, or if they've not got a partner, they could be freezing their eggs at that point without creating embryos.
Tell me more about how this is emotionally. I think there's the science of it.
Yes.
But what we don't talk about really, do we talk about it? We're beginning to talk about it, is the mental struggle through this process and the hope and all of that.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me about it.
I think I went into it really naively, thinking it was going to work. You know, there was going to be, the egg collection was going to be really great. They were going to take out loads of eggs, they'll fertilise. And I was doing a round which included unlimited transfers of embryos. So I thought, brilliant, I can have as many embryos transferred as I like. But once I was actually into the system and going through the process, I ended up with 1 embryo on that first round that was viable, just the one. There was no viable embryos to freeze. So there was never going to be, that unlimited round of transfers wasn't going to be, it wasn't something that was going to be relatable for me because I couldn't have any others. And that was my only go on the NHS. So it felt a lot of pressure for that 1 round to work. Because at the time we hadn't saved any money to do IVF.
How expensive is it?
It's around £10,000 a round.
Go. And there's no guarantees.
And there's no guarantees. So
that's hard.
It's really, really tough. I mean,
so financially, mentally, physically, like,
Yeah.
That's huge. And you went through it 5 times.
5 times. So the first round we didn't have to pay for. We were very fortunate that the NHS covered that for us. But then the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounds we paid for ourselves. And a lot of clinics offer finance, so we did take that up, a couple of the times because we needed to. But it's really, really tough. It's really, really, really tough, especially when you go into it the first time expecting a positive outcome and not knowing that there could be all these barriers in the way. Just from the egg collection, you could end up with no eggs, or you could end up with no eggs fertilizing, with no blastocysts. So there's constantly these barriers.
And the chemicals have an impact, I'm guessing, on your state of mind too, because they're pumping hormones into you.
Absolutely. So many hormones.
And how long does a round go on for? Like, how do you even work or function as a human like that? Like, honestly, when you actually hear it properly, and to fathom how women do this alongside having to continue with life is quite amazing.
Yeah, it really is, because a full round could take anything sort of really between 30 to 45 days of going in and out. This is just for the stimulation side.
Okay.
Because some clinics would prefer you to go in for pre-check assessments, and they want to check the thickness of your uterus before you go into the actual treatment. And then there's other things they want to check. Some of them want to start you on a pre-injection as well. Luckily, on my first round, they didn't do this with me. I just started so that the treatment generally starts on day 1 of your cycle.
Right.
So on day 1 of your period, you start injecting.
Right.
And you're injecting morning and evening. And everything's got to be kept in a fridge. So if you're traveling, it's pretty impossible. If you're working away from home, it's really tough. And then they want you to come in for scans to check on the thickness of your uterus and the follicle growth all throughout the next 15 days, because they then will decide when to give you the trigger shot to release the eggs. So I did this amongst working full time, and I somehow I only told a couple of people at work, and luckily we all tried to keep it as under wraps as possible, because I didn't also want anyone knowing, in case it got my hope. I didn't want anyone else to feel sad for me, because I was already feeling sad enough as it was. I just didn't need that added pressure of them feeling sad. So we didn't tell any family, we didn't tell any friends. I told 2 work colleagues, and I went off for appointments and came back and worked in between. And I didn't even tell my boss at work. I just kept it all under wraps from that first round. And luckily, we had a success with our first round, which is amazing.
Amazing. But to go through all of that, financially, mentally, physically, and also keep it to yourself, which I know so many people do until they become pregnant. And they don't even say they're pregnant until they reach that stage where you can have a scan and you can announce it. And even then, at that point, it must be very stressful, because you think, is this going to be okay, because you've suffered so much trauma. What advice would you give to someone who is about to embark on this journey?
Wow, it's a really good question. I think, looking back, what I found really tough was being around other friends and family members who, we were all the same sort of age, so we're all going through trying to get pregnant, and that's what I found the toughest part, was being around pregnancy announcements, being around joyful celebrations of people being pregnant. And I guess my advice would be protect yourself so much. And if you've got a hunch that your friend is going to tell you that they're pregnant that day, or if you don't want to go to a baby shower, don't go. Protect your mental health and put yourself first. That would be my biggest advice.
So create some boundaries then as far as protection, like what works for you, what triggers you,
Yes.
and so forth. Because those emotional experiences also don't help your body if you are going to get pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't want stress.
Exactly.
Right? So creating boundaries then.
Absolutely. Create those boundaries. I mean, it's really tough because I am still, and always was happy for people that announce that they're pregnant. But I do find even now, I still get a little bit triggered when I hear someone say how easy it was to get pregnant, and that especially when you hear I wasn't sure if I wanted a third or I wanted a second.
Yeah.
And I think, oh gosh, to be in that position, to have that choice, and have that choice.
And
so
not
freely.
acknowledge that choice and how precious it is.
I know, exactly. It's a very fortunate position to be in. And what's made me realise is that how amazing pregnancy, full conception really is. And it's a miracle we're all here. I don't know how we all, when...
It's incredible.
It really
Let's
is.
not even think about it because it's bizarre.
It really is though, it really is. To think that we were a little egg and then a little sperm came and made us. And it's incredible.
It is incredible.
And what I would say as well, can I want one thing?
Yes.
So there's this one book that I think really changed my life.
Okay, that's
So
good.
so this one book, so when I was going through my 5th round, so I'd gone through, after my 1st round, which was a success, I just wanted to try, can I add this bit?
Yeah.
So after my 1st round, it set me up thinking that if we go into our 2nd round, we're going to have a success again because the 1st round had worked. But unfortunately, the 2nd round didn't work. It ended up, we ended up not even conceiving. It was just the embryo didn't take. Then I went through a 3rd round where I had a miscarriage, a 4th round where I had a miscarriage, and then on my 5th round, I went to see an acupuncturist, and she recommended a book to me, which is called It Starts With the Egg. And her theory is that you can actually affect the egg quality that you are born with. Because we are born with a certain amount of eggs, but if you read into the science of it all, you can actually make those eggs better by nourishing your body with great supplements and better diet, and cutting out certain things like gluten and dairy. So there's a whole chapter in the book where she talks about endometriosis. So if people are suffering from endometriosis, there's a diet that is geared up to kind of support you through your IVF journey.
Okay.
And I found that book so amazing. So after I read it, after I'd done my 4th round, my 3rd round of being unsuccessful, and I read the book as it was recommended to me, and that day I got rid of all my plastics from my lunchbox at work, because this is what the book recommended. I went gluten-free, dairy-free. I took all the supplements, and they are expensive. You're looking at £100 a month on supplements, which is crazy. I took them all because I thought I need to throw everything at this now. This is our final shot. I was 39 years old.
Yeah.
And I'd started the process when I was 32. And I went on to have the best yield of egg collection that I've ever had.
Oh, wow.
They collected 19 eggs.
Wow.
And I was 39. And I really believe that this book's theory of being able to nourish your body and make those eggs better over a 3-4 month period, I think it really worked. And I just wanted to say, I think if you're in that journey at the moment, definitely look into it and look at what else you can do to help you make your eggs better.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to read the book.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really changed my life. I really felt like I'm going to do this now. I'm going to literally throw everything at it because I've got nothing else to lose.
Yes.
My mental health was on the floor. I thought I cannot go through. And because I'd already had one successful round, it had led me down the path of feeling like, I don't know, I thought every round would then be a success.
Yeah.
And it was great that I had that hope, but actually I was quite naive that even the IVF journey is a bit of a numbers game, and it doesn't always end the way we all hope and want. And because we're paying for it, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have the the reward at the end.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was deeply personal, and it's made me feel quite emotional when you think about how precious it is and how some people don't have that choice, and maybe we should be more sensitive and aware of, oh, are you going to have a third?
Oh my goodness.
Or are you know, like these things that we just say, and we should just be a little bit more mindful. I think that's what I've learned from this conversation, that you're an amazing influencer and interior account, and you would never know that you struggled and you went through that. So I'm really honoured that you wanted to share this with me today.
Oh.
If you want to find Amanda, you can find her, like she said, on
House Lust on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and I think that's about it.
where she is an amazing stylist and juggler. Do you share the kids on your pages?
I do. I share them. I share them occasionally. Yeah,
Okay.
they're on there a little bit.
Well, thank you for joining me.
I really enjoyed interviewing Amanda and hearing her story, also making myself more aware of the IVF journey and how much I didn't know about the women that endure this process. If you enjoyed listening or watching, then I'd be so grateful if you subscribed. Lots of love!